Welcome to Moroni Reviews. Fun. During this Easter and Passover season, there is no shortage of Moses movies depicting the Exodus.
Yeah, you mean like the Ten Commandments?
Or the animated Prince of Egypt.
Or what about VeggieTales, Noah and the Big Exit?
Sure. There was also that Christian Bale one a few years ago.
No, we don't talk about that one.
Well, today we are looking at a more obscure telling done by Hanna-Barbera in 1985. The Greatest Adventure, Stories from the Bible, Episode 4, Moses.
Well, Moroni, when you brought this one up, I had never seen this one before.
Well, not many people have. I grew up with this classic tale from a Walgreens dollar cassette bin that I was like, that looks cool, and my mom picked it up for like $1. So I watched it often along the creation, and also Noah, David and Daniel.
David and Daniel is one story?
No.
I don't remember they were in the same time period.
The lion took down the giant.
Daniel was like, hey, David, I heard you've got this giant problem. I've got these lions. Let's sick them. That movie from India, RRR.
Oh.
Where there's like this epic fight scene where the guy like literally throws a cheetah at the other guy.
Yes.
They're just over the top. Why not?
Exactly.
Daniel's just throwing lions and David's just slinging his sling.
Considering how muscular the people were back then, I bet they could chuck a whole lion at somebody, honestly. But yeah, this was done by Hanna-Barbera. Years later, I was surprised that they did like this short series of Bible stories.
Yeah, so interesting that Hanna-Barbera delve into the scripture thing. I grew up with Scooby-Doo,
Flintstones, Jetsons, Johnny Quest.
Are you aware of Jabberjaw?
I don't think I have either. What a more obscure one.
They struck gold with Scooby-Doo and they're like, well, let's just do that again. It's like, can you copycat yourself? So they went through a series of hip college-age kids who had a goofy animal sidekick and they solved mysteries. Jabberjaw was one of them. It was a shark. They were in an underwater futuristic world.
Oh, they had a friend shark rather than a pet dog.
Yeah, and they were in a band.
A band and a shark solving mysteries. How is that not a formula for success?
It was a thing.
I mean, it definitely was.
This show definitely is in the vein of Hanna-Barbera with the animation style. The simple, most of it's holding still, but their mouth is moving or they do little movements with their head and they repeat animation frames. Very much felt in that vein.
Yes, very very classic 80s animation where it was very simple, but yet the background and the music, it's all done very well and very effective animation, I would say, where you know, minimalistic here and there, but yeah, when it really pops, it pops off amazing. You're like, whoa, that was pretty good.
There's a pretty recognizable voice acting cast here.
The voice of Moses in this one was done by Jones Whitmer, along with famous voice actor Terrence McGovern, who is Launchpad from DuckTales, and Rob Paulson, who has just extensive resume of voice acting. Most prominently, Pinky and the Brain, as Pinky, and Yakko from the Animaniacs.
And then there was Darlene Carr, who played Margot, and she is most known for being the girl in Jungle Book.
The girl.
She's done a lot of things, but probably the most recognizable of her roles is this role as Margot in the Greatest Adventures, Stories from the Bible.
Darlene played a lot of supportive voice acting in many other shows, even in Darkwing Duck and other such classics.
In Adventures in the Book of Virtues, she was the girl's mother.
Oh.
Step up in the role.
Well,
you're no longer the girl, you're the girl's mother.
Impressive. Great resume, but I think the one that steals the show, the Pharaoh has such an amazing voice. I'm like, who is this guy? And it's none other than the legend, James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
AKA Darth Vader.
Darth Vader is the Pharaoh. Yeah, I guess that fits.
The Pharaoh does command such authority. And Darth Vader, naturally, he just commands authority.
That voice, he could come in and say anything. He could say, like, this is CNN, and it's like, you're still just going to be terrified.
You are fake news.
Can you imagine if your dad had James Earl Jones' voice? I don't know. I think I would have gone further in life if my dad sounded like that.
You come home, you didn't return with honor, and he's just like, remember who you are.
You're right, Dad.
The intro is two young archaeologists and their nomad friend Moki discovered this amazing discovery. Is Moki's inclusion or situation problematic for today's audiences?
I think some people would be will probably frown upon it now, but I think it was strongly borrowing from Indiana Jones. They had a guy there because they're at this Middle Eastern excavation site, which it doesn't look like they're digging up much. It looks like they're building a sandcastle. They're just a small little hole. What are you even digging? There's nothing around there.
Well, Moroni, didn't you build sandcastles?
Not in the middle of the desert. I think Moki was done fine. I get a lot of strong vibes like from Captain Planet's own Mati and Moki. I mean, similar. I don't know if they meant it to be that way, but you know, it is what it is. They were worded better now, but I like that there was at least a cultural diversity of this group of people, which Hanna-Barbera was always at least trying to do that. Like for Johnny Quest, he had a Middle Eastern friend, as his best friend, and other inclusions of other cultures. And Hanna-Barbera tried to be respectful in all of their representations in their episodes and stuff. Sometimes it came off as pretty stereotypical, borderline offensive, but never intentionally to be that. I think they were just trying to showcase it in a way that the people would recognize and understand easier.
Yeah. We live in a day of age where it's, no, I don't want an Indian lady on my butter box. Get her off of there. Or, there can't be a smiling black lady on my bottle of syrup. I feel like today people might scoff at that.
I feel like Japan does this very well, where it characterizes a lot of characters, but they're not human. We just simply condense it all into one thing and just be a ball with eyes. But I would say in this particular one, they borrow a lot of elements and a lot of inspiration from the Ten Commandments, especially with the way Moses has that classic red with that black and white stripe on his robe, along with the way that Pharaoh Ramses is represented. It's very similar to the live action one. Do you think that was intentional?
I haven't seen Ten Commandments in like 20 years. So maybe. I'm more familiar with the Prince of Egypt version. But it would be so impossible to make a version of this without drawing inspiration from Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments is just such an iconic, epic movie that, like, you would be deliberately avoiding being like Ten Commandments.
That movie and the influence, you could tell that it's bled into it and into a lot of iteration of Moses in a positive way. You can even say Prince of Egypt was inspired too, because even his wardrobe and everything was also an homage to Moses and the Ten Commandments.
Have you seen the VeggieTales, Mo and the Big Exit?
I have not.
I think they were reluctant to do that one earlier on. They kind of did it later. The vibe I got was they were approaching a story that had been done so many times. Doing a Moses story wasn't unique. So they tried to turn it on its head. They did it as a Western parody. They did it as a parody to The Lone Ranger. They did The Lone Stranger. But I think they were trying to say, okay, how do we do this different? And in some ways it worked, some ways it didn't. I gotta give them credit for trying. How do you take a different approach on it? I did feel like they hit up a lot of Bible accurate details. There's things they weren't accurate about, but like the detail of Moses and Aaron working together, and the detail of saying, Pharaoh, let us go, and Pharaoh saying, okay, you can go, and then Pharaoh taking it back, and then the people saying, you're just making it worse. The Hebrews being worried that this isn't going to work out. That detail, and the way that back and forth of Pharaoh saying, okay, you can go, you don't have to go, or even saying the line, we need to go out in the wilderness to do sacrifices to the Lord our God. One thing, when studying it last year, Come Follow Me, a podcast I was listening to pointed out that the reason that they wanted to leave and go do the sacrifices out in the wilderness as opposed to just doing it there in Egypt was that it would be uncomfortable for the Egyptians to see them sacrificing animals, because what are the Egyptian gods?
Animal based, or there's animal headed ones,
animal head creatures. So doing a sacrifice to a sheep would be offensive to their god.
So got the wrath of how do you spell that? Kunum? Kanam? Kanam.
Yeah, sure. Your guess is better than mine.
I wonder if the Pharaoh's decision about bringing them back, or was that his advisors that were like, sir, you made a terrible mistake. Who will do the fields? That's a good point. Who will build the temple? That's also a good point. Are you just really going to let the Pharaoh admit defeat? You, a god incarnate as a man, to just admit defeat? It's like, you got a good point there, Charles. Forget it. Bring them back.
Well, maybe. That kind of brings us to that scene. It's most of that classic Hanna-Barbera animation, but there's this one scene where Pharaoh is talking to his advisor, and the animation is a lot more detailed. The shadows, the movements, and it's just this little scene that you blink and you miss it, but the animation is so much better in that sequence.
Even the servant, it's just like, you think that their Israelite gods will strike us down? Fear and wonder in their eyes. It's so animated. Like, man, if this whole thing had been looked like that, Sheesh. It'd be quite amazing. But the thing that I forgot to mention is that these little Bible stories are fun because you, as the audience, you're supposed to connect with these three characters. You could imagine yourself as though you were like that one of them.
As if you were Adam and Eve.
You were Adam and Eve, you were there.
Tis blasphemy.
When Moses comes in the first time in the episode, and they're like, oh, it's Moses! And just awe and like respect. I think that'd be my reaction too. If I knew that Moses just walked into the room in the flesh, I'd be like, oh my goodness.
The Moses that they show in The Chosen is just such an anti-typical look for Moses. He doesn't have the big beard or the big flowing white hair.
Aww.
He's a little overweight. But it's a good scene, and there's a good parallel that they bring in with that. It's done in like a flashback.
I mean, Moses looks like the Zeusified. He's like, I represent God and I am God's chosen vessel. I'm like, well, God chose a pretty powerful looking vessel, man. My goodness. In this episode, he looks so stoic. Like, he's strong facial expressions, like strong eyebrows. Like, everything about this guy is just, he's unmovable. He's just like, I will do the Lord's will no matter what it takes. These archaeologists are like seeing unfold the 10 miracles, I should say. Was it the 10 miracles? Or the 7 plagues?
7 plagues.
It was 7 plagues. 10 commandments, 7 plagues. Well, my mistake.
Come on, Moroni.
There were 7 Dragon Balls. My bad.
7 Horcruxes. I mean,
7 Horcruxes.
Infinity Stones.
8 wonders of the world. Dang it.
You mentioned that he looked like Moses, and that was definitely the 10 Commandments, where they just have this chiseled beard and chiseled hair. Mm-hmm. It looks like marble. I think they're drawing from Michelangelo's statue of Moses. It was at the classical movement in the Roman Catholic Church was to kind of draw from that Greek and Roman god aesthetics and bring that in. And so that's why they all look like these godly figures. For some reason, this statue from Michelangelo has horns.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Is
that supposed to be his hair? No, those are horns.
They say that Mormons have horns, but why did Michelangelo depict Moses with horns?
Yeah, weird.
Kind of something you were saying earlier. Why did Pharaoh change his mind? Mm-hmm. Now, the King James Version of the Bible says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. However, Joseph Smith, in his inspired translation, made the adjustment to say that Pharaoh hardened his own heart.
Towards God.
Exactly. This depiction doesn't try to interpret Pharaoh's mind being changed as God hardening his heart. So it could leave it up to interpretation either way. On my mission, when we were trying to have success, I was putting in all my effort. There came a realization at one point of, I needed to rely more on God, and that all my effort won't do anything if I don't allow God to guide the work. It was just as much as Pharaoh trying to stop the work of God with his hard heart. It was impossible. Or as the Doctrine and Covenants say, can a man stretch forth his puny arm and stop the flow of the Missouri River? No. So shall God not be hindered in pouring revelation upon the heads of the Latter-day Saints. That with my effort as a missionary, all my effort could do nothing, but if I was relying on God, that effort could be blessed.
Well said. A hardened heart prevents change from happening, prevents peace from entering. In the end, you're just hurting yourself, and that's exactly what Pharaoh is depicted here. Like, he just couldn't let it go, and he just had to have one last hoorah, and that ended in tragedy for him. And his face at the end, he just like, what have I done? I lost my army, I lost my horses, my chariots, my soldiers, all drowned in the sea because of my hubris. Because I couldn't let it go. I could not let him go. My own brother, I could not let him go, and he just falls in defeat. In this series, they all refer to each other as brothers, which Prince of Egypt does that very well, and it's just so emotionally gripping. 2 brothers at opposite sides, which is just tragic. But over here, it's just the Pharaoh and Moses, and it still comes off pretty well, because he's just like, I messed up. I always wanted to know how Ramses was after Moses left.
Yeah, we don't get to see that.
What went through his head, in those years that came after. But this little episode condenses the entirety of Moses and his journey through through Egypt and getting the people out. It doesn't show Moses' story from when he's in the wilderness, he speaks with God, to the burning bush. That doesn't receive all that, his journey into becoming the man that he enters into Egypt as. It just ends right there, which I think is nice because it gets people to be like, oh, I know the general story, the big point of the story, and the grand miracle of him splitting the seas and all that stuff. That's so cool. But, if I want to know more, I have to read the actual Bible to find out more about what happened to Moses to get me interested in it. Which I think that was the point of these cartoon stories, much like Wishbone was for like Greek mythology or like other great classic stories.
You have got to be kidding.
What didn't work?
Certain interpretations were not exactly there. They had to rush scenes because they had to get the whole story in, but for a condensed version, this does work for short, simple story. And it's animated very, very well. I mean, does the time traveling archaeologist add anything?
It's its own framing device, and it's one that's perfectly fine of having kids from our day go. But at the same time, I don't know that you strictly need it, because other things have shown that you could just tell the story in world.
Yeah, I mean, it does well enough. I mean, rather than just simply telling the story of Moses without an outsider's perspective. As a kid, with my imagination, I was able to just walk inside with them and seeing the events unfold before my eyes. And I personally appreciate of these Hanna-Barbera short films because the Bible is a very hard thing to read and understand for a young mind, and just to see a faithful interpretation of it in a entertaining cartoon series is the perfect formula, rather than just like, and lore and 85 days they spent in the desert wondering, why are we here?
Where am I going? And where did I come from?
Right.
Ask the missionaries. They can help you.
Would you show this to your kids?
Oh, I'd have no problem showing this to my kids. Not at all. In fact, watching it was like, I'm curious to watch other parts of other episodes in this series. I grew up more with the living scriptures. Moroni, you mentioned the creation part, that it was just a trip. Curious to watch it now.
It was such a 80s music video. Whoa! They go through time and space and masses forming together. I'm just like, what is going on?
Well, comment below. Do you want us to take some shrooms and watch the creation episode?
We will gladly do so.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Comment below what your thoughts. Have you seen this episode of the Hanna-Barbera The Greatest Adventure story from the Bible? Did you grow up watching this? What is your favorite Moses depiction? Tell us where we went wrong.
And also comment below if you grew up on other animated Bible stories that are near and dear to your heart, or you just found them weird and just got stuck in your head and you wonder, did that really happen? Comment below and leave us a like. We will gladly react to more of these and any other stuff.
Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Adios.